Welcome to the fifth video in this series for North Georgia Knitting Guild's 2022 Sock Knit Along. This video is all about working two socks at the same time, thus avoiding second sock syndrome. I'll show you two techniques. The first one involves two circular needles, and the second involves one long circular needle set up in a configuration called Magic Loop. Let's get started. I have two swatches here to represent my socks, and I've already set them up in the two circular needle configuration. You'll need to divide your socks in half. Most people will divide the instep on one needle and the sole on the other, and that's what I've done. So the insteps are both on the gray needle, and the soles are both on the brown needle. In the two circulars method, you'll use one needle at a time. The other needle simply rests, it dangles, it doesn't do anything. It just sits and waits. So what does that look like? I use both ends of the gray needle. The brown needle is not doing anything. And I knit across the instep of the first sock. When I get to the break, I change yarn. If you don't change yarn and keep going, you will knit your socks together. You probably don't want to do that. So I change yarn and I keep knitting, and now I am knitting on the instep of the second sock. I've gotten to the end of the instep stitches. I pull the stitches up onto the cable part of my circular needle. I don't want my circular needle to fall out of these stitches. I don't want live stitches, and I don't want to lose my needle. And now I turn the work. And now I'm on the sole stitches. The gray needle will rest, and I will work with the brown needle. And let me find the yarn. The yarn's right there. So I am using the brown needle. The gray needle is resting. I knit across the sole of the second sock. I get to the end of the sole of the second sock. I change yarns. And now I knit across the sole of the first sock. And I'm at the end of the sole. I am back at the beginning of the round. I will turn the work. After sliding the brown needle through the stitches so they will not go anywhere. Okay, there we go. A couple comments about this. I am using two slightly different needles here. If I were working on a real project, I would be sure to use the same type of needles. These are slightly different, and I might get two slightly different gauges with them. You do not want one side of your socks to have one gauge and the other side to have a different gauge. So use the same type of needles. The other thing I wanted to mention is this technique works for very small circumferences, but also very large circumferences. Let's say I wanted to work a blanket from the center out. I could use 2 circulars at the beginning when it's very tiny, and as it grows and gets more stitches, that would still work. Let's say the blanket got very large, and I got to the point where I couldn't fit all the stitches on only 2 needles. I could add a 3rd needle or even a 4th needle and keep working, just keep growing my blanket. This technique would be the same. You would work 1 needle at a time and the other needles would rest. So theoretically, I could knit a house cozy using this technique. I would just need many, many circular needles. So that is the 2 circulars method. Now I'd like to show you the magic loop method. And I will do that with my gray needle. I would start by threading the gray needle through the first half of the first sock and then the first half of the second sock. And as it turns out, I've already done that. That was part of my 2 circular setup. So now I need to thread the gray needle through the second half of the second sock. So I will do that. Second half of second sock. And now I need to thread the gray needle through the second half of the first sock. And I am doing that. I can put the brown needle away. For magic loop, I like to start from a start or home configuration. That means I have the stitches sort of up on the needle tips. The needle tips are facing to the right, and I have a loop out here to the left. So that's my home or start configuration. My most recent stitch is this one. So I will pull this needle out and bring it around. And now I can engage the tips. Now I can work with this. While the technique is called magic loop singular, I think of it as loops plural, because you'll see as I start to knit across the first half of the first sock, you'll see what I have is I have a loop at this end and I have a loop at this end. So even though it is called magic loop singular, I think it's more helpful to think of it as magic loops plural. And then it looks a lot like the 2 circulars method. So I've worked across the instep of the first sock. Once again, I need to change yarns. And I work across the instep of the second sock. I get to the end of the insteps. I turn the work. I bring my needles back to start or home position. So once again, the needles are facing to the right. There is a loop to the left. The most recent stitch is this one, so this is the needle that I bring out, and I fold it around to get my second loop, because I want loops plural. And now I knit across the sole of the second sock. And once again, I change yarns. And work across the sole of the first sock. And then I'm at the beginning of the round. I turn and return my work to the start or home position. Now you'll notice that the configuration is first half of the first sock, first half of the second sock, second half of the second sock, second half of the first sock. So it's half, whole, and other half. And I think that's what messes people up when they try to figure this out on their own. I think most people would put all of one sock on and all of the other sock on, and it doesn't quite work the way you think it will. So that's the trick, is half, whole, and half. When you're dividing your socks in half, and this goes for either technique, you want to avoid cables or decreases right here or here. And let me show you why. So I'm going to work across the instep here. And let's say I wanted to do a 2 by 2 cable with these stitches. Let's see what happens. Here I am at the 2 stitches I'd like to cable, and I need to access these 2 stitches. These need to go over here and those need to go over there, and you can see I have a sock in my way. Now, that's not to say I couldn't work that cable using this method, but to do it I need to plan ahead. I would have needed to knit these 2 stitches on the previous round, park them on a stitch holder so they're not locked on my circular needle, and then I would be able to move them and work them right now. These 2 stitches would get put on a stitch holder and they would dangle while I dealt with this sock, and then when I got over here and started the sole, these 2 stitches would be available and I could work them. So it can be done, but it's very fiddly. So regardless of which technique you use, try to avoid action at either of these interfaces. Because you don't want action at these interfaces, I tend not to get my socks in the 2 at a time configuration until after I've completed the heel turn. So some people will cast on both toes and work both socks at the same time all the way from the beginning. What I prefer to do is cast on one toe, work all the way up the foot, turn the heel, and park it. Then cast on the other sock at the toe and do the same. Get them both past the heel turn. Then get them into this configuration where all I have to do is work mindlessly in the round on up the legs. So you can do either, but that's how I like to do it. Another thing to keep in mind is knowing which of these methods you like can help save you money when you are buying needles. You absolutely can have circular needles in all the different length increments. You can do that. You can have interchangeable needles, and that will also give you the different length increments. But if you know either of these methods and know which one you like, what you can do instead is figure out which type of needles you like and then buy yourself a good set of them in the right length. So I like Magic Loop. I have the collage squares in the 40-inch length, which is about 100 centimeters. I have a set of Addi Turbos in the 60-inch or 150 centimeter length. With that long length, I can make almost anything on my Addy Turbos. I could make a blanket, a sweater, a hat. I could even do little bitty baby booties using that long length as a magic loop. If you prefer the two circulars method, you can also work very small or very large. So if you like the two circulars method, just figure out what needles you like and buy 2 sets of them, probably in the 32 or 40-inch length, which would be 80 or 100 centimeters. So don't feel that you have to have all the length increments for your needles. Figure out what you like and then buy just what you need. And then the last thing I want to mention is, while this technique works for making socks, of course you could also use it for mittens and gloves or even sleeves on a sweater. So there you are. That is 2 different methods for working 2 socks at the same time, thus avoiding second sock syndrome. Happy sock knitting!